Good morning. Welcome to episode 76 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today, I will be doing a 5-round NFL mock draft, Jaguars mock draft, more so, following the 2025 NFL Combine, which was held last week in Indianapolis. I don't necessarily have a ton of Combine notes specifically, but try to take this mock draft in a different direction since I will be doing a mock each Monday leading up to the draft in late April. So still got 2 more months of these, and so that's my explanation for where I went with the 5th pick. But as always, happy to answer any listener questions that might pop up during the live stream. But with that, let me just get into this mock draft that I did on PFF this morning. 5th overall pick. Let me go over some more background first before I reveal who I picked to the audio listeners, because if you're viewing on video, you can see my full mock results already on the screen right now. But with the 5th pick, I was workshopping a take and starting out thinking, who are the Jaguars going to take? Let's say Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Will Campbell, and Mason Graham are all off the board. Those are kind of the consensus top 4 non-quarterback prospects, whether we're talking Jaguars or NFL teams at large. And I think the smoke out of the NFL Combine last week is that the Patriots are invested or a lot more interested in taking Mason Graham. And a lot of it has to do with Will Campbell's poor arm measurements. I think he's got a pretty below average, not just below average, below average arm length as well as wingspan does Will Campbell. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. His wingspan actually might have turned out to be not too bad, but Will Campbell's arm length is definitely an issue, and it was an issue on tape too. He lost frequently to a lot of the top edge defenders in the class or just around the country. But the way that he lost was also you just think that he might be better fitted for a move inside, and so I think that the Patriots might not necessarily want to spend a top 4 pick because they have the 4th overall selection. They might not want to spend the 4th pick on what could turn out to be an offensive guard prospect. Obviously, we saw Quentin Nelson, an offensive guard, be taken, I believe it was 6 overall by the Colts a few years ago. So it's not like it's unheard of to take an interior offensive lineman in the top 5 or the top 10 or in that range. But generally, it's less valuable of a position, and you're really swinging for pass rushers and pass protectors along the edge, so offensive tackles. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out, especially with the Patriots having the pick before the Jaguars at 5th overall. But I'm trying to think of where the Jaguars, where they would go if, again, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Will Campbell, and Mason Graham are all off the board with the 5th overall pick. And that is an unlikely scenario because I'm sure there'll be at least 1, if not 2, quarterbacks taken in the top 5 in April in the 1st round. But again, I'm just curious, would the Jaguars in that scenario take just the top-ranked offensive lineman that they have on their board? Would they take the top pass rusher? I'm sure it obviously comes down to the grades between the 2 of those. But one of the other questions is whether they would take an offensive skill position player, so an offensive weapon, whether it's a receiver or a tight end or a running back. And so I've seen a lot of people on the timeline kind of clamoring for either Ted McMillan, the receiver out of Arizona, or Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. And those are both great prospects, definitely 1st-round caliber, definitely should be taken within the first 20 picks of the 1st round. But at the same time, I don't think that they're like elite, easy top 5 talents that you can just sprint to the podium for and kind of forget the pick and just kind of lock it in as a win. And so I think that Ashton Jeanty, the running back out of Boise State, Heisman runner-up behind Travis Hunter in 2024, I think he is that caliber of player where, yeah, he does play running back, which is a devalued position, kind of like interior offensive line that I was just talking about. But I also think that similar to how the Jaguars probably won't be, even if they do have 2 starting caliber tackles on their roster, in Anton Harrison and Walker Little, I don't think that would necessarily prevent them from taking an offensive tackle prospect at any point in the draft, but including the 1st round. And so in the same regard, I think that the Jaguars do have 2 decent running backs already on the roster that can start in Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. But I think for both of those players, even though we saw really good flashes from ETN in 2023 and then Bigsby last year in 2024. I don't think that having either of those players on your roster should prevent you from taking a swing if you want to. And so here with the Jaguars, I have them taking Ashton Jeanty, Boise State running back with the 5th overall pick. And the take here really is, again, first of all, to reiterate, like I'm going to be doing a mock draft every Monday, and so I don't want to just be taking Will Campbell or Mason Graham alternating every other one. So I wanted to explain the scenario in which the Jaguars would potentially take Ashton Jeanty. I certainly do not expect this to happen, but I just thought it'd be a good exercise to talk through. And really the take is that I think that Jeanty should be the top offensive weapon, offensive skill position player on the Jaguars' board, even above Ted McMillan and all the other receivers and Tyler Warren and all the other tight ends. I just think that he's that much better of a prospect. And James Gladstone last week in Indianapolis, the new Jaguars GM, when he was asked about his team building approach and what he looks for, well, when he in terms of like the positions that he values, he said he values the positions that are along the front and the positions that will put points on the board. Running back is definitely one of those positions that puts points on the board. UCF Jaguars said, ain't no way Tony, as in Tony Khan, will sign off our running back at 5. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Again, I don't expect this to be the scenario, but Jeanty is just such a good prospect. I think that once you get past like those top 4, again, of Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Will Campbell, and Mason Graham, then it kind of becomes a little bit iffy or wishy-washy, or however you want to say it, where the talent kind of plateaus a little bit, and like whoever you're taking at the 6th overall pick isn't that really that far off from who you might get at the 16th overall pick. But I do think that Ashton Jeanty is like, it's those top 4 players and then Ashton Jeanty, and he would be in that top 5 if everyone didn't devalue running back so much. And then it's the rest of the class. And so I just think it would be an interesting scenario. Certainly don't expect everyone to like this mock selection, but yeah, those are my thoughts. To move on to the 36th overall pick, I spent the 2nd rounder on Ohio State edge rusher Jeanty Tuimoloa. Hopefully I pronounced that one right. He's a guy that I don't think is going to be necessarily having a 2nd round grade on every team's board. This definitely isn't a great comparison, but like Trayvon Walker was taken because he was immediately like a great run defender, and he had so many traits that even if he wasn't a productive or dominant pass rusher at the collegiate level, he had so many great athletic traits that you could see a vision where he would develop into a star pass rusher at the NFL level. You can't really see that path as much for JT. He's definitely going to be a 3-down defender, great already against the run, and he just doesn't really have as much twitch or as much bend, especially around the corner, to be able to have a path to be a true star pass rusher. But again, he does provide 3-down value, and I think that the Jaguars, since they do have Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, they will certainly want to add to the edge group, but they don't necessarily need to get a star edge rusher since they already have 2 great ones. And so they can go with someone who would be more of like kind of a 3rd rotational edge rusher, someone who can, again, play all 3 downs and kind of line up in a couple of different spots. You don't necessarily want JT like lining up over the center or truly moving all over the place, but I think he can do that if you want to do like exotic stunts or blitzes on 3rd down and stuff like that. And so JT also super high character. I think he's definitely fits what James Gladstone looks for, because he's, I wouldn't say an old prospect, but he's not young either. And Gladstone and the Rams in recent years have favored older prospects, more experienced prospects, and JT is that. And then I don't really know anything about JT off the field, but he definitely has the intangibles that the Jaguars and Gladstone would be looking for on the field in terms of just bringing every down tenacity and finishing every play and showing on the field that you really have the will to win. And so I think that JT Tuimoloa out of Ohio State makes a lot of sense as a 3rd pass rusher behind Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen in the 2nd round out of Ohio State. Moving on to pick 70 in the 3rd round, I went with interior defensive lineman Joshua Farmer from Florida State. Honestly, don't know a ton about Josh Farmer. He was just one of the last guys in the interior defensive line class that I recognized, and I think that the Jaguars will want to address both the edge and the interior of their defensive line. in both free agency and the draft, but I have them addressing their defensive line with 2 of the first 3 picks in this mock. Again, don't really have a lot of information about Josh Farmer. I was kind of picking more so for the position than the name. But I don't know. Hopefully, some Seminole fans can shed a light on him since he did go to Florida State University. With my other third-round pick, 88th overall, the Jaguars have, I believe it was from the Brian Thomas, Dallas Turner first-round trade in 2024 with the Minnesota Vikings. Not 100% sure on that, but the Jaguars do have an extra third-rounder, 88th overall. I spent on an offensive line, an offensive tackle in college at West Virginia, Wyatt Millam, who's projected to be more of an interior offensive lineman, probably a guard at the NFL level, because he's got 32-inch arms, which are pretty short. But really, that's like the main, I don't know, what's the word for it? Negative, I guess, on Millam's resume. He definitely has like the tenacity and grit that Tony Baselli and James Gladstone and Liam Cohen are going to look for across their entire football roster, but especially up front with the offensive linemen. I'm sure you've heard this quote before because I've said it multiple times on this show, and it's been said on other shows as well. But Liam Cohen, during his introductory press conference a couple weeks ago, had a quote where he said, "The first thing that opposing defenses see when we, the offense, break the huddle is the offensive lineman coming up to the ball, and we want that to mean something, and it will." And so I think Wyatt Millam definitely fits that philosophy, that idea. He's super athletic and really a good like zone blocking guy. He can probably win as a gap rusher or a gap blocker too, where he's kind of pulling and working in space a lot. And he's really good at that because of his timing more than anything else. I think that myself included, but a lot of people get really excited about athletic offensive linemen, and you're like, can kind of just imagine them wheeling out on poles and getting into space and kind of beating up on linebackers and defensive backs and smaller guys. And that's really fun to hypothesize about, but it comes down to a lot more than just athleticism. You also need like timing and pace to be able to actually finish those blocks in space, which is a lot easier said than done. And so for both blocks in space against smaller defenders, but then also just for kind of simple double teams, combo blocks on simple runs like inside zone or even a duo, which is more of a gap man scheme run. You need the athleticism to be able to climb to the second level, but also, again, the timing and the pacing. And Millam definitely has that. And so I think that a lot of Jaguars fans also are kind of clamoring for offensive line, and rightfully so, because I think the front office and the organization are also going to be clamoring for offensive linemen. But I do think that because, again, the Jaguars have 2 starting caliber offensive tackles, what they really need is interior offensive linemen. And I think that they can just do a bunch of dart throws at that position later in the draft rather than feeling like they have to address it in the top 50. James Gladstone was saying at Indianapolis last week that more at-bats is always a good thing. And the Jaguars, even though they have 24 draft picks over the next 2 years, which is the most in the NFL, they want to add to that. They want to continue to accrue draft capital. But the thing is, like, you definitely do want more at-bats, but you also have to know when to swing and when to swing for certain positions. And so it's it's a little bit hypocritical since I did take a running back with the 5th overall pick. And you can definitely find solid, at least rotational running backs all the way through the 7th round. But yeah, so, the point being, I think for offensive linemen, I wouldn't panic if you're a Jags fan and they end up not addressing the offensive line with a top 50 pick. I think that, again, they can take dart throws at the position in the middle rounds and even the late rounds as well. Moving on to the 4th round pick, Jaguars' original 106 selection. I went with tight end Gunnar Helm. If every day that we don't hear about Evan Engram in the news, it feels less and less likely that he will be on the team in 2025. But I think even if Engram is on the team, he's kind of nearing the end of his contract. I believe he's 29 years old. He might be entering his age 30 season. And so you do want to have a succession plan. James Gladstone did say last week that he expects Brenton Strange to be used more often and in ways that we haven't seen before. But I don't think that Brenton Strange is like even if you do think that he's like a Pro Bowl caliber guy, he's not. One guy doesn't just solve your tight end room. Luke Farrell is also a tight end, and I think that he's one of the small handful of guys that you could actually expect the Jaguars to try to bring back. But as of now, Brenton Strange is the only guy that is kind of going to be a long time, or at least under contract for multiple seasons in the tight end room. And this is both a really strong and really deep tight end class. And so it would definitely behoove the Jaguars, I think, to take a tight end at some point. So I went with Gunnar Helm out of Texas, tight end with the 106th pick. Didn't have time to research this story more before the show, but last week, apparently he had some pretty underwhelming combine measurements and drills. But apparently it was because he twisted his ankle before when he was warming up for the 40, or maybe it was his first attempt during the 40-yard dash. And so, but he's still, even though it ended up being poor times, he still can do kind of like retry those times in those drills at his pro day at Texas. And the fact that he sprained his ankle and still participated in the drills, I think is going to stand out as an intangible that James Gladstone and the Jaguars are going to be interested in. So Gunnar Helm, tight end, Texas, 4th-round pick. The other 4th-round pick, I went back to skill position players. I went with Kyle Williams, wide receiver out of Washington State. Definitely a sleeper that I'm keeping my eye on. Was definitely a winner at the Senior Bowl and has continued to impress throughout the draft process. He's definitely a big play receiver, kind of like I saw that Lance Zierlein of NFL.com compared him to Marvin Mims. And so I think that makes sense, at least in terms of style of play, where they're both like deep threats, big play guys, and you kind of draft them in the middle rounds, hoping that they can immediately give you kind of big play potential and hopefully long-term can develop into more of a steady every down receiver. So I think Kyle Williams, definitely name to watch, definitely later round receiver that I'm keeping my eye on. And then with the 5th pick, the Jaguars have more than this, but this is the time when I start not recognizing names. And I also realized that I hadn't addressed the secondary at all in this mock draft. So I went with Billy Bauman Jr. out of Oklahoma. He's a safety. Don't know anything else about him, but thought he had a cool name. And yeah, so welcome to Jacksonville, Billy Bauman Jr. To recap, with a 5th overall pick, I went with Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. In the 2nd round, Ohio State edge rusher JT Tuimailoa. In the 3rd round, I went with Florida State interior defensive lineman Joshua Farmer and West Virginia interior offensive lineman Wyatt Millam. In the 4th round, I went with Texas tight end Gunnar Helm and Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams. In the 5th round, finally addressed secondary with Oklahoma safety Billy Bauman Jr. So that'll do it. Hopefully, even if you guys disagree with my 5th pick in Ashton Jeanty, you kind of understand at least my explanation around it. Again, just trying to think of different scenarios because I don't want to just be taking Will Campbell in every single mock and then have him be taken 4th overall by the Patriots and then not have anything to go back to. So yeah, if the Jaguars end up making a huge surprise pick and end up taking Ashton Jeanty, then at least we broke it down here first. But yeah, that'll do it for this episode. We'll be back tomorrow, 9:04 a.m. Eastern, with Hayes Carline to break down some more of what we learned last week at the NFL Combine, both in terms of college prospects that the Jaguars could take, but then also what we learned from James Gladstone, Liam Cohen, and Tony Baselli, who all had media availabilities last week on Radio Row at the Combine. So 9:04 a.m. Eastern with Hayes Carline tomorrow. See you guys then. Thanks as always for watching/listening. Peace.